Dear friend, tonight, there is nothing you need to hurry toward. Nothing you need to finish. Nothing you need to worry about for just a little while. So, take a slow breath and let yourself become comfortable. Imagine that the sounds around you are slowly becoming quieter. The modern world begins to fade. The lights, the traffic, the phones, the busy streets, all becoming distant. And in their place, another world begins to appear. A world from hundreds of years ago. A world without cars, without electric lights, without television, and without the constant noise of modern life. It is evening. The sky above a small town is turning dark blue. A few clouds are moving slowly across the moon. The streets are narrow, and the buildings are made from old wood and stone. A warm light shines through small windows. Somewhere nearby, a fire crackles quietly. A wooden door closes. Then, silence. Most people are already home. Families are sitting around small tables. A mother is preparing a simple meal. A tired worker is washing his hands. A child is falling asleep beside the fireplace. And outside, the town is becoming still. But not everyone is sleeping. A few people are still working. And tonight, we are going to meet some of them. Not kings, not queens, not famous soldiers, not wealthy merchants. Instead, we will meet ordinary people. People whose names have mostly disappeared from history. But their jobs, their daily routines, and the strange things they did for a living can tell us something beautiful about the past. Because history is not only about great events, it is also about ordinary evenings, ordinary streets, ordinary homes, and ordinary people trying to make a living. Our first story begins near the edge of town. There is a quiet pond there. During the day, the pond is surrounded by birds, children, and people carrying baskets. But tonight, it is almost completely empty. The water is dark. The trees are still. A thin mist rests above the surface. And beside the pond, there is a small wooden basket. Inside the basket are several glass jars. The jars are empty, for now. A man stands beside them. He is dressed simply. His boots are old. His coat is worn. And in his hands, he carries a long wooden walking stick. He is waiting for the morning, because his work begins early, very early. His occupation is one of the strangest jobs we will discover tonight. He is a leech collector. Yes, a leech collector. Hundreds of years ago, leeches were used in medicine. Doctors believed that removing blood could sometimes help patients. And because doctors needed leeches, someone had to collect them. That someone was the leech collector. Tomorrow morning, before the town becomes busy, he will walk into the shallow water. He will wait quietly. He will watch the surface. And slowly, the small creatures will appear. It is not a glamorous job. It is not an easy job, but it is useful. And for this man, it is simply work. A way to earn money. A way to bring food home. A way to live another day. The moon rises a little higher. The man looks toward the quiet town. Then he picks up his basket, and slowly he walks home. Tomorrow, his strange work will begin. But tonight, the pond remains quiet. The town remains peaceful. And the old streets slowly disappear into darkness. Take a slow breath, dear friend, and let us continue when the morning finally arrives. Morning arrives slowly, very slowly. The darkness above the old town begins to fade. The stars disappear, one by one. A soft gray light appears behind the trees. The streets are still empty, the shops are closed, the windows are dark, and most of the town is still asleep. But near the edge of town, one man is already awake. It is the leech collector. He opens the wooden door. The hinges make a quiet sound. He steps outside. The air is cool. He pulls his old coat around his shoulders and looks toward the pond. For a moment, he simply stands there, listening. There is the soft sound of birds, the distant bark of a dog, and somewhere behind the houses, the first baker is beginning his work. The man picks up his basket. Inside are several empty glass jars. He checks them carefully. Then he begins walking, slowly down the narrow road. His boots make a soft sound against the damp ground, step by step by step. The road leads away from the town. Soon, the houses become fewer, the fields become wider, and the sounds of the town disappear behind him. He walks toward the pond. This is where his work begins. When he arrives, the water is perfectly still. A thin layer of mist floats above it. The surface reflects the pale morning sky. The man places his basket beside a tree. Then, he sits for a moment. He waits. There is no reason to hurry. His work requires patience, a great deal of patience. After several minutes, he slowly removes his boots. He rolls up his trousers, and carefully, he steps into the shallow water. The water is cold, very cold. He takes another step, then another. The mud moves softly beneath his feet. He uses his wooden stick to keep his balance, and then he waits. The pond becomes completely quiet again. There is very little movement, very little noise. Mostly, he simply waits. The morning sun rises. The mist begins to disappear. A bird lands on a nearby branch, and somewhere beneath the water, the leeches begin to move. The collector watches carefully. After a while, he notices one, then another. Slowly, he reaches down and places each one inside a glass jar. Then he waits again. Another appears, another jar, another quiet movement. Hour after hour, he continues. There is something peaceful about the routine. For the collector, it is simply part of his morning. He thinks about his family. He thinks about the money he will receive. He thinks about the food he can buy. And perhaps he thinks about going home. Eventually, the basket becomes heavier. The jars are no longer empty. The man steps out of the pond. He sits beneath the tree. He dries his feet. He puts his boots back on. Then he carefully checks every jar. Nothing is broken. Everything is secure. He closes the basket and begins walking toward town. By now, the town is awake. Smoke rises from chimneys. Shopkeepers open wooden shutters. A horse moves slowly along the road. A baker carries warm bread, and the leech collector walks quietly through it all. Most people barely notice him. To them, he is simply another worker, another person carrying a basket, another person beginning another day. But inside that basket are creatures that doctors and apothecaries may be waiting for. The collector reaches a small shop. The door opens. An apothecary stands inside. He looks at the jars. He checks them carefully. Then he nods. The collector has done his work. He receives his payment, a few coins, placed quietly into his hand. He closes his hand around them and smiles. It is not a fortune, but it is enough. Enough for bread, enough for a simple meal, enough to take something home. He walks back through the market. The town is louder now. People are talking. Carts are moving. Animals are making noise. But the collector does not hurry. He walks slowly toward his home. And perhaps, as he walks, he feels something that people in every century have understood. The quiet satisfaction of finishing a day's work. A strange job, yes. An unusual job, certainly. But it is his job. And for him, it is simply life. Dear friend, perhaps the past was not always as exciting as history books make it seem. Sometimes, history was simply a person walking slowly home with a basket in his hands. Sometimes, the strangest jobs were simply ordinary work for the people who lived them. So take a slow breath and let that thought settle gently in your mind. The old town is still there in our imagination. The streets are warm with sunlight. The bakery smells of fresh bread, the pond is quiet, and somewhere a tired worker is finally resting. For now, we can rest too, and when evening comes, we will meet another unusual worker, waiting quietly in the shadows of the old town.
The afternoon slowly fades. The warm sunlight begins to disappear behind the old rooftops. Shadows stretch across the narrow streets. One shop closes, then another. A wooden cart passes slowly through the market. Its wheels make a soft sound against the stone road. The town is becoming quieter again. And near an old grain warehouse, another worker is preparing for the night. The rat catcher. He stands beside a small wooden table. On the table, there are several traps, a coil of rope, a small lantern, and a worn leather bag. He checks everything carefully. Then, he lights the lantern. The little flame begins to glow. He picks up his bag and steps into the evening. His work usually begins when other people are going home. During the day, rats hide. At night, they become active. And the rat catcher knows this very well. He walks toward the warehouse. The building is old. Its wooden walls are dark with age. Inside, hundreds of sacks of grain are stored. For a merchant, the grain is valuable. But for rats, it is food. The rat catcher opens the door. It makes a long, slow, creaking sound. He lifts his lantern. The light moves across the walls. For a moment, nothing happens. Only silence. Then, a tiny sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The man stops. He listens. Another sound comes from somewhere beneath the wooden floor. He slowly moves forward. He does not rush. He has done this many times before. He knows that patience is important. He places a small trap near the wall, then another, near a pile of sacks. He checks a narrow opening beneath a wooden shelf. Then, he waits. Outside, the wind moves through the empty street. Inside, the warehouse is almost completely dark. The lantern flickers softly. The rat catcher sits on an old wooden box and waits. Minutes pass, perhaps an hour. Then, he hears movement. Very quietly, something runs across the floor. The man lifts his lantern. A small shadow disappears behind a sack. He smiles. He already knows where it is going. He does not chase it. Instead, he waits. The rat catcher understands something simple. A frightened animal moves quickly. A comfortable animal becomes careless. So, he waits. The warehouse becomes quiet again. The lantern burns slowly. The man looks toward the small window. Outside, the moon has risen. Its pale light falls across the rooftops. The town is sleeping now. Families are inside their homes. Children are dreaming. Bakers are resting after a long day. Shopkeepers are asleep. But here, inside this old warehouse, one worker continues his strange, nightly routine. He checks another corner, then another. He moves quietly between the sacks. He knows the paths the rats prefer. He knows where they search for food. He knows where they hide. Years of experience have taught him these things. To most people, he may look like a strange man walking through the darkness. But to the merchant, his work is important. A single rat can damage food. Many rats can destroy an entire storehouse. So the rat catcher continues. Slowly, carefully, patiently. Eventually, he finds what he was looking for. He checks the traps. One of them has caught a rat. He carries the trap outside. The night air feels cooler now. He closes the warehouse door behind him. Then, he looks up at the sky. There are hundreds of stars above the town. For a moment, he simply stands there. The night is peaceful. The streets are empty. The old buildings are quiet. And the lantern in his hand casts a small circle of warm light around his feet. Perhaps he thinks about going home. Perhaps he thinks about tomorrow. Perhaps he thinks about nothing at all. Sometimes, after a long day of work, there is comfort in thinking about nothing. Just walking, slowly, through the quiet streets. The rat-catcher begins his journey home. His footsteps echo softly between the buildings. Step by step by step. The town is asleep, and for a moment, the strange job seems almost peaceful. Not frightening, not exciting. Just quiet work under a quiet sky. As he disappears around the corner, the lantern light slowly fades. The old warehouse remains behind him, and the night becomes still again. But this is not the end of his work. Tomorrow night, he will return. The rats will return too, and the quiet routine will begin again. Because in the old world, even the strangest jobs were part of everyday life. And while the rat-catcher walks home, another worker is beginning a completely different kind of evening. Someone who does not work with rats, or ponds, or medicine. Someone who works with people, and something much smaller. Something inside the ear. But that story will come later. For now, the town is sleeping. The lanterns are growing dim. The moon hangs quietly above the rooftops, and the rat-catcher finally reaches his door. He opens it softly, steps inside, and closes it behind him. The night continues, quietly, peacefully, until morning. Alio, the ear cleaner. Morning returns quietly over the old town. The sky is pale, and the streets are still cool from the night. A few birds begin to sing. One wooden door opens, then another. The baker lights his oven. A shopkeeper lifts the shutter of his store, and slowly, another ordinary day begins. Near the center of the town, a man prepares for his work. He carries a small wooden case. Inside are several tiny instruments. He checks each one carefully. Then he closes the case. His work is unusual, but to him, it is simply his profession. He is an ear cleaner. Long ago, people did not have the modern clinics and medical offices we know today. Instead, many small services were offered in markets, bathhouses, and busy public streets. An ear cleaner could sit in a market, wait for customers, and provide a simple service. The man places his wooden case beside a small stall. Then he sits down. He waits. There is no need to hurry. Soon, an older merchant approaches. The man sits beside him. The ear cleaner speaks quietly. The customer relaxes, and slowly, the work begins. There is no loud noise, no excitement, only careful movements and a quiet conversation. Outside, the market continues. A horse passes. A cart rolls over the stones. Someone calls to a customer. A child laughs nearby. But the ear cleaner remains calm. After a few minutes, the merchant stands. He thanks the worker and returns to the market. The ear cleaner closes his case. Then he waits again. Another customer arrives. Then another. The work is repetitive, but peaceful. The man has probably done this for many years. He knows how to sit quietly. He knows how to make people comfortable. And he knows that patience is important. By midday, the market becomes busy. The sun is high above the rooftops. The smell of warm food fills the street. Merchants speak with customers. Children walk between the stalls. Horses move slowly through the crowded road. And beneath a small wooden sign, the ear cleaner continues his work. To us, the occupation may seem strange, but the people of the past had their own everyday routines. They needed their hair cut. They needed their shoes repaired. They needed their clothes cleaned. And sometimes, they needed someone to help with their ears. Every age creates its own little professions. Some disappear, some remain, and some become so unusual that centuries later, we can hardly imagine them. The afternoon arrives. The sunlight becomes softer. The market begins to slow. One merchant packs away his goods. Another closes a wooden box. The ear cleaner looks at the sky. He knows his working day is almost finished. He carefully cleans his small instruments and places them back inside the wooden case. Then he closes it. For a moment, he simply sits. The market is becoming quiet. The sounds are softer now. The sun is moving lower. A gentle breeze passes through the street. The man finally stands and begins walking home. Step by step through the old streets. He passes the bakery. He passes the old stone fountain. He passes the quiet market stalls. Soon, he reaches his small home. He opens the door, steps inside, and places his wooden case on a shelf. His work is finished. The room is quiet. A little evening light enters through the window. He sits down and rests. Perhaps he thinks about tomorrow. Perhaps he thinks about his family. Or perhaps he thinks about nothing at all. Just like people today, he has worked all day, and now he is tired. Outside, the town continues to become darker. Lanterns begin glowing along the streets. The market disappears into the evening. The footsteps become fewer, and the old town slowly settles down. Another strange job has come to an end. Another ordinary person has finished another ordinary day. And somewhere beyond the quiet rooftops, another unusual story is waiting. For now, the streets are peaceful. The wind is gentle. The lanterns are glowing. And the old town is slowly preparing for night. The knocker-up morning comes quietly over the sleeping town. The streets are dark, the windows are closed, and most people are still asleep. There are no alarm clocks ringing, no phones beside the beds, no bright screens waiting to wake anyone. But somewhere in the quiet streets, a man is already awake. He puts on his coat. He takes a long wooden pole and steps outside. His work is unusual. He is a knocker-up. His job is to wake other people. Long ago, many workers had to wake before sunrise. Factory workers, mill workers, miners, bakers, and other early workers could not afford to sleep too long. But reliable alarm clocks were not always available. So some people paid another person to wake them. The knocker-up walks slowly through the sleeping streets. The morning air is cool. The town is almost silent. His footsteps echo softly between the old buildings. Soon, he reaches a small house. He looks toward an upstairs window. Then, he raises his long pole. Tap, tap, tap against the glass. He waits. Nothing happens. He taps again. Tap, tap, tap. A curtain moves. Someone inside has heard him. The knocker-up lowers his pole. His work here is finished. He continues walking. Another house waits nearby. Then another. Some knocker-ups used long poles. Others used small sticks. They tapped on windows until the sleeping worker woke. The job sounds simple, but it required patience. The knocker-up had to remember which houses needed waking. He had to know which window belonged to each worker. And he had to be careful. If he knocked too softly, the person might continue sleeping. If he knocked too loudly, he might wake the entire house. So every morning, he repeated the same careful routine. Walk, stop, look up, tap, wait, and continue. Slowly, the sky begins to change. A faint light appears behind the rooftops. The first birds begin to sing. Smoke rises from a chimney. A baker starts preparing bread. Somewhere nearby, a factory worker opens a door. Another worker steps outside. The sleeping town is beginning to wake. The knocker-up continues his rounds. Tap, tap, tap. Another worker wakes. Another door opens. Another morning begins. For the people who depended on him, his work was important. Being late for work could mean losing money. For some workers, it could even mean losing their job. So the knocker-up became a familiar figure in many early morning streets. He walked while everyone else slept. He worked before sunrise, so others could begin their day on time. By the time the sun rises, the town is fully awake. Carts move along the roads. Horses walk slowly between the houses. Shopkeepers open their doors. Workers make their way toward factories. The smell of fresh bread fills the cool morning air. And the knocker-up finally begins walking home. His work is finished. He passes the same houses he visited earlier, but now their windows are open. People are awake. The streets are alive. He reaches his small home. He opens the door, steps inside, and hangs his coat. Perhaps he prepares a simple breakfast. Perhaps he drinks a warm cup of tea. Then he sits quietly. His morning began long before most people woke. And tomorrow, he will do it all again. Before sunrise, he will take his long pole. He will walk through the dark streets. And once again, he will knock on windows. Tap, tap, tap. Today, we wake with phones, digital clocks, and gentle alarms. We rarely think about who wakes us. But long ago, sometimes another person was the alarm clock. A quiet worker walking through the darkness, helping other people begin another ordinary day. It was a strange job, but to the people who needed him, it was simply part of life. And like many old professions, the knocker-up eventually disappeared. Modern alarm clocks became common. Then came radios, electric clocks, and eventually, the small phones we carry today. The quiet footsteps of the knocker-up were no longer needed. Yet his story remains as a small memory from another time. A time when mornings began slowly. A time when streets were dark and quiet before the first workers appeared. And now, the old town is becoming peaceful again. The streets are empty. The windows are dark. The wind moves gently between the rooftops. Another strange job has come to an end. Another ordinary person has finished another ordinary day. And somewhere, beyond the quiet houses, another forgotten profession is waiting to be remembered. For now, the town rests. The lanterns glow softly. The night air is cool. And the old streets, slowly, fall asleep. The knocker-up morning comes quietly over the sleeping town. The streets are dark, the windows are closed, and most people are still asleep. There are no alarm clocks ringing, no phones beside the beds, no bright screens waiting to wake anyone. But somewhere in the quiet streets, a man is already awake. He puts on his coat. He takes a long wooden pole and steps outside. His work is unusual. He is a knocker-up. His job is to wake other people. Long ago, many workers had to wake before sunrise. Factory workers, mill workers, miners, bakers, and other early workers could not afford to sleep too long. But reliable alarm clocks were not always available. So some people paid another person to wake them. The knocker-up walks slowly through the sleeping streets. The morning air is cool. The town is almost silent. His footsteps echo softly between the old buildings. Soon, he reaches a small house. He looks toward an upstairs window. Then, he raises his long pole. Tap, tap, tap against the glass. He waits. Nothing happens. He taps again. Tap, tap, tap. A curtain moves. Someone inside has heard him. The knocker-up lowers his pole. His work here is finished. He continues walking. Another house waits nearby. Then another. Some knocker-ups used long poles. Others used small sticks. They tapped on windows until the sleeping worker woke. The job sounds simple, but it required patience. The knocker-up had to remember which houses needed waking. He had to know which window belonged to each worker. And he had to be careful. If he knocked too softly, the person might continue sleeping. If he knocked too loudly, he might wake the entire house. So every morning, he repeated the same careful routine. Walk, stop, look up, tap, wait, and continue. Slowly, the sky begins to change. A faint light appears behind the rooftops. The first birds begin to sing. Smoke rises from a chimney. A baker starts preparing bread. Somewhere nearby, a factory worker opens a door. Another worker steps outside. The sleeping town is beginning to wake. The knocker-up continues his rounds. Tap, tap, tap. Another worker wakes. Another door opens. Another morning begins. For the people who depended on him, his work was important. Being late for work could mean losing money. For some workers, it could even mean losing their job. So the knocker-up became a familiar figure in many early morning streets. He walked while everyone else slept. He worked before sunrise, so others could begin their day on time. By the time the sun rises, the town is fully awake. Carts move along the roads. Horses walk slowly between the houses. Shopkeepers open their doors. Workers make their way toward factories. The smell of fresh bread fills the cool morning air. And the knocker-up finally begins walking home. His work is finished. He passes the same houses he visited earlier, but now their windows are open. People are awake. The streets are alive. He reaches his small home. He opens the door, steps inside, and hangs his coat. Perhaps he prepares a simple breakfast. Perhaps he drinks a warm cup of tea. Then he sits quietly. His morning began long before most people woke. And tomorrow, he will do it all again. Before sunrise, he will take his long pole. He will walk through the dark streets. And once again, he will knock on windows. Tap, tap, tap. Today, we wake with phones, digital clocks, and gentle alarms. We rarely think about who wakes us. But long ago, sometimes another person was the alarm clock. A quiet worker walking through the darkness, helping other people begin another ordinary day. It was a strange job, but to the people who needed him, it was simply part of life. And like many old professions, the knocker-up eventually disappeared. Modern alarm clocks became common. Then came radios, electric clocks, and eventually, the small phones we carry today. The quiet footsteps of the knocker-up were no longer needed. Yet his story remains as a small memory from another time. A time when mornings began slowly. A time when streets were dark and quiet before the first workers appeared. And now, the old town is becoming peaceful again. The streets are empty. The windows are dark. The wind moves gently between the rooftops. Another strange job has come to an end. Another ordinary person has finished another ordinary day. And somewhere, beyond the quiet houses, another forgotten profession is waiting to be remembered. For now, the town rests. The lanterns glow softly, the night air is cool, and the old streets slowly fall asleep.
The night is slowly fading over the old town. The streets are dark. The lanterns still glow softly. Most windows are closed, and behind those windows, people are sleeping. But somewhere, a man is already awake. He sits quietly inside his small home. Beside him is a simple wooden box. Inside the box are a few tools. He puts on his coat and prepares to leave. His work is unusual. He is a human alarm clock. Long ago, before alarm clocks became common, people still needed to wake early. Workers had to reach factories, bakers had to prepare bread, farmers had to begin before sunrise, and shopkeepers had to open their doors at the right time. So some people were paid to wake them. The man steps outside. The morning air is cold. The streets are almost empty. He walks slowly toward the first house. When he arrives, he looks toward an upstairs window. Then he raises a long stick. Tap, tap, tap against the glass. He waits. Nothing happens. He taps again. Tap, tap, tap. A curtain moves. A sleepy face appears behind the window. The man smiles quietly. His job is done. He moves on. Another house waits nearby, then another. Each morning, he follows the same route. He knows every street, he knows every house, and he remembers which workers need to wake first. Some people may need to wake at 4 in the morning, others at 5. Some need only one gentle knock, others need several. The work may sound simple, but it requires good memory and great patience. The man cannot sleep late, he cannot forget a customer, and he must arrive at exactly the right time. As the morning continues, the town begins to wake. A bakery door opens. A horse moves slowly along the road. A factory worker walks through the mist. A shopkeeper lifts a wooden shutter. The quiet streets begin filling with life. The human alarm clock continues his rounds. Tap, tap, tap. Another worker wakes. Another door opens. Another day begins. By sunrise, the man has already walked through much of the town. He finally turns toward home. The sun appears above the rooftops. The streets are brighter now. People are everywhere. Children walk beside their parents. Merchants carry baskets. Carts move over the stones. The man returns home and closes the door. His work is finished. Perhaps he makes breakfast. Perhaps he drinks some warm tea. Then he rests. His morning began before everyone else's, and tomorrow he will do it again. Today, we rarely think about how easy it is to wake up. A small alarm can ring beside the bed. A phone can vibrate. A bright screen can light the room. But long ago, waking up depended on people. Someone had to walk through the darkness and knock on the window. The job disappeared slowly as alarm clocks became cheaper and more common. Eventually, people no longer needed someone walking through the streets before sunrise. The human alarm clock became a forgotten profession. Yet his story tells us something simple. Even in the past, people had schedules, they had jobs, they had responsibilities, and they worried about being late. Their lives were different, but in many ways, they were just like us. They woke tired, they worked all day, they returned home, they ate, they rested, and eventually, they went to sleep. Now, evening has returned to the old town. The market is quiet, the shops are closed, lanterns glow along the narrow streets. The man has finished another day. His wooden stick rests beside the door. Outside, the wind moves gently. The rooftops disappear into the darkness. One by one, the last lights fade. Soon, the whole town is sleeping again. And somewhere, when morning comes, another quiet worker will walk through the darkness and begin knocking. Tap, tap, tap. Another strange job waiting patiently inside the pages of history. For now, the old town is peaceful. The streets are still. The lanterns glow softly, and the sleeping houses rest beneath the quiet night. The morning can wait. For tonight, everyone can sleep. Morning arrives slowly over the old town. The sky is pale. The streets are quiet. A few birds begin to sing. Inside a small room, a man is already awake. There is no machine beside him, no electric device, no modern calculator. Only a wooden desk, some paper, and a pencil. His work is unusual. He is a human computer. Long before electronic computers, people were paid to perform calculations. They worked with numbers for businesses, scientists, engineers, and government offices. Their minds were their most important tools. The man sits at his desk. He places a sheet of paper in front of him. Then he begins calculating. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. He works carefully, one number at a time. There is no need to hurry. A small mistake could change the final answer. So he checks his work. Then he checks it again. Outside, the town is beginning to wake. A shopkeeper opens his door. A baker carries fresh bread into the street. A horse moves slowly along the road. But inside the quiet office, the human computer continues working. His job may seem strange today. We can ask a calculator to solve a difficult problem in less than a second. But long ago, every calculation had to be done by a person. Large groups of human computers sometimes worked together. One person calculated, another checked the numbers, someone else recorded the results. Together, they could complete thousands of calculations. The work required patience, it required concentration, and most of all, it required accuracy. The man looks at his paper. He writes another number. Then he pauses. He checks the previous line. Everything looks correct. So he continues. Hour after hour, the numbers slowly fill the page. By midday, the sunlight has moved across the room. The office is warmer now. Outside, the streets are busy. Inside, the work remains quiet. Only the sound of pencils moving across paper can be heard. There is something peaceful about the routine. Write, calculate, check, repeat. The man does not need to travel far. He does not need complicated machines. His mind and his pencil are enough. The afternoon arrives. His eyes are tired. He stretches his hands and looks out the window. For a moment, he watches the town. Then he returns to his desk. There are still numbers waiting, so he continues. Perhaps he is calculating money for a business. Perhaps he is helping with measurements. Perhaps he is working on a scientific problem. Whatever the purpose, his work matters. Many important projects once depended on people like him. Before computers became machines, humans themselves were the computers. As evening approaches, the office becomes quiet. The man finishes the last calculation. He reads the page carefully. Then he places the pencil down. The working day is finished. He gathers the papers and puts them into a folder. He closes the wooden desk. Then he stands. Outside, the evening light covers the old streets. The market is slowly closing. Lanterns begin to glow. The man walks home through the quiet town. He passes the bakery. He passes the fountain. He hears distant footsteps on the stone road. Soon, he reaches his home. He opens the door and steps inside. His papers remain behind, waiting for another morning. Tonight, he does not need to think about numbers. He can simply rest. Today, computers are everywhere. They fit inside our phones. They can perform calculations almost instantly. But the idea of a computer once meant something very different. It meant a person, a quiet worker with a pencil, a sheet of paper, and a careful mind. Their profession eventually changed. Machines became faster. Calculators became smaller. Electronic computers changed the world, and the human computer slowly disappeared. Yet their work helped build the path toward the modern world. Their names may not appear in history books, but thousands of calculations once passed through their hands, and perhaps that is what makes their story worth remembering. Not every important worker was famous. Some simply sat at a desk and worked quietly until the numbers were correct. Now, night has returned. The old town is peaceful. The streets are empty. The lanterns glow softly. Inside his small home, the human computer rests. Tomorrow, the desk will be waiting, the paper will be waiting, and the numbers will be waiting too. But for tonight, there is nothing more to calculate. The town grows darker. The wind moves gently through the sleeping streets, and another forgotten profession quietly fades into the night. For now, the old town can rest, the numbers can wait, and the quiet worker can finally sleep. The lamplighter evening arrives slowly over the old town. The sun is disappearing behind the rooftops. The streets are becoming darker. Shopkeepers begin closing their doors. Merchants pack away their goods, and one by one, the people begin returning home. But one man is just beginning his work. He carries a long pole over one shoulder. At his side is a small ladder. His work is simple but important. He is a lamplighter. Long ago, before electric streetlights, towns became very dark after sunset. There were no bright lamps on every corner, no glowing signs to guide travelers. Instead, streets were lit by small oil or gas lamps, and someone had to light them. The lamplighter walks slowly through the evening streets. His first lamp stands beside an old stone building. He places down his ladder. Then he climbs carefully. At the top, he reaches toward the lamp. A small flame appears. The darkness around it begins to disappear. The lamplighter climbs down and continues walking. Another lamp waits nearby, then another. One by one, the dark street begins to glow. The work is quiet. There is no crowd around him. Most people simply continue walking without thinking about the person lighting the lamps. But every evening, he follows the same routine. Walk, stop, climb, light, and move on. The town slowly changes. A warm glow appears outside a bakery. Another lamp shines near the market. Then another beside the old fountain. Soon, the streets are no longer completely dark. People can see where they are going. Travelers can find their way home. Shopkeepers can close their stores safely. And the old town feels a little less mysterious. The lamplighter continues through the narrow streets. He knows every corner. He knows which lamps need more attention. He knows which ones sometimes go out. His work requires patience. It also requires him to work in every kind of weather. Cold mornings, windy evenings, rainy nights. Still, the lamps must be lit. By the time he reaches the center of town, the market is almost empty. A few merchants remain. A horse stands quietly beside a wooden cart. Someone closes a shop door. A child walks home holding a parent's hand. Above them, the newly lit lamps shine softly. The lamplighter pauses for a moment. He looks down the street. Only a short time ago, everything was dark. Now, small circles of warm light stretch through the town. Then he continues. The evening grows deeper. The moon appears above the rooftops. The air becomes cooler. Most people are already inside. But the lamplighter still has work to finish. He reaches the final street. One last lamp stands beside an old house. He places the ladder down, climbs slowly, and lights the flame. For a moment, he looks across the quiet rooftops. Then he climbs down. His work is finished. He picks up his ladder and begins walking home. The town now glows with hundreds of small flames. It is not bright like a modern city, but it is enough. Enough to guide a traveler, enough to show a doorway, enough to make the darkness feel a little gentler. The lamplighter reaches his home. He places his tools beside the door. He removes his coat and sits down. Outside, the lamps continue burning. Tomorrow evening, he will do it again. But many years later, the world will change. Electricity will arrive. Streetlights will become brighter. And eventually, one switch will light an entire street. The lamplighter will no longer be needed. His long pole will become an old memory. His daily route will disappear. Yet his work once brought light to thousands of sleeping streets. He did not build great monuments. He did not become famous. He simply walked from lamp to lamp every evening. And sometimes, the quietest jobs leave the most peaceful memories. Now, the old town is completely dark, except for the gentle lamps. The streets are empty. The market is silent. The bakery is closed. The fountain rests beneath the moonlight. The flames move softly in the cool evening air. The lamplighter is home. His work is finished, and the old town is ready for sleep. The lamps glow. The wind is gentle. The rooftops are quiet. And slowly, very slowly, the entire town falls asleep beneath the warm evening light. The ice cutter. Morning arrives quietly over the old town. The winter sky is pale. The air is cold. A thin layer of frost covers the rooftops. Near the edge of town, a man prepares for work. He puts on a thick coat. He pulls on his gloves. Then he picks up his tools. His work is unusual. He is an ice cutter. Long ago, before modern refrigerators, people still needed a way to keep food cold. During winter, large ponds and lakes could freeze completely. Workers would travel onto the ice and cut large blocks from it. Those blocks could then be stored and used during warmer months. The ice cutter walks toward a frozen pond. The morning is quiet. His breath appears like a small cloud in the cold air. When he reaches the water, he stops at the edge. The surface is covered with thick, clear ice. He tests it carefully. Then he begins marking the surface. Long, straight lines appear across the frozen water. The blocks must be cut into manageable pieces, so the work begins slowly. The man pushes his heavy tool into the ice. A deep crack appears, then another. The sound travels across the frozen pond. Crack, crack, crack. The work is physical and tiring, but the ice cutter continues patiently. Around him, other workers may be doing the same. Together, they cut the frozen surface into large blocks. The morning becomes brighter. The winter sun rises above the distant trees. The ice shines under the pale sunlight. For a moment, the frozen pond looks almost beautiful, but there is still work to do. The workers separate the blocks and guide them toward the shore. Large pieces of ice are lifted carefully and placed onto wooden sleds. The sleds are then pulled toward the storage house. The work continues for hours. By midday, the workers are tired. Their hands are cold. Their coats are covered with tiny pieces of frost. But the ice must be collected while the winter weather lasts. Once the blocks are stored, they can remain useful for many months. The storage building is dark. Its thick walls help keep the cold inside. The blocks of ice are packed together with insulating material. In this way, the ice can survive long after winter has ended. The afternoon arrives. The sun becomes softer. The ice cutter finishes his final piece. He looks across the frozen pond. Tomorrow, he will return again. But for today, his work is finished. He gathers his tools and begins walking home. The road is quiet. Snow rests along the fences. Smoke rises from the chimneys of nearby houses. Inside those homes, families are preparing dinner. The ice cutter finally reaches his small house. He opens the door and steps inside. Warm air surrounds him. He removes his heavy coat. Then he sits beside the fire. His hands slowly become warm. Perhaps he thinks about the frozen pond. Perhaps he thinks about the long winter ahead. Or perhaps he simply enjoys the quiet. Today, we rarely think about how easily we can make ice. A refrigerator hums inside almost every home. Cold drinks are available at any time. Food can remain fresh for days or weeks. But long ago, cold had to be collected. It had to be stored, and workers had to cut it from frozen lakes and ponds. The ice cutter was one of those workers. His job depended entirely on the weather. If winter was warm, there might not be enough ice. If the ice was too thin, the work could be dangerous. So every frozen morning was important. The profession eventually changed. Modern refrigeration made natural ice less necessary. Machines could create cold without waiting for winter. The ice cutter slowly disappeared, but his work was once an important part of everyday life. He helped families store food. He helped businesses keep things cool. And he connected the cold winter months with the warm seasons ahead. Now, evening has arrived. The frozen pond rests beneath the dark sky. The town is quiet. Smoke rises slowly from the chimneys. Inside his home, the ice cutter rests beside the warm fire. Outside, the winter wind moves gently across the empty streets. The moon shines over the frozen rooftops. The old town grows still. Another strange job has come to an end. Another ordinary worker has finished another ordinary day. And beneath the quiet winter sky, the frozen pond waits patiently for another morning.
Morning arrives gently over the old town. The streets are beginning to wake. Shopkeepers open their doors. Carts move slowly across the stone roads. A baker places fresh bread inside his window. And near the center of town, a man prepares for work. He does not carry tools. He does not have a wooden box. Instead, he carries a large sign. His work is unusual. He is a human billboard. Long ago, before newspapers became common, and long before television or the internet, businesses still needed customers. So they found simple ways to advertise. One of those ways was to hire people to carry signs through the streets. The man places the sign against a wall. He checks it carefully. Then, he lifts it onto his shoulders. The sign is large and easy to see. It contains a simple message about a shop, a product, or an event. Then, he begins walking, slowly through the busy streets. People pass him on their way to the market. Some look at the sign. Some continue walking. Others stop for a moment to read the words. The man does not need to speak. The sign speaks for him. He simply walks from one street to another. The morning becomes busier. Merchants call to customers. Horses pull carts. Children walk between the shops. The smell of bread and warm food fills the air. And among all these sounds, the man continues his quiet work, step by step through the market. He knows that repetition is important. A person may ignore the sign once, but perhaps they will notice it again and again. Eventually, the message may stay inside their mind. This is the simple idea behind advertising. The afternoon arrives. The sun is high above the rooftops. The streets are crowded. The man continues walking. His shoulders are tired. The sign is heavy, but he keeps going. Every few minutes, he changes direction. He walks past the bakery, then the fountain, then the market, then the main road. The same message travels through the town, again and again. Sometimes people smile at him. Sometimes children stare. Perhaps some people find his work amusing. But to the man, it is simply a job. He is being paid to carry a message, and the message must be seen. By late afternoon, the streets begin to quiet. The merchants start packing their goods. The carts become fewer. The sunlight becomes softer. The man finally lowers the large sign. His shoulders feel lighter. He carries it back toward the shop that hired him. The shopkeeper takes the sign. The day's work is finished. The man receives his payment and begins walking home. He passes through the evening streets. Lanterns are beginning to glow. The market is slowly closing. A few people remain outside the shops. The man walks quietly among them. Perhaps tomorrow he will carry another sign. Perhaps it will advertise a new shop, a traveling show, a special sale, or some new product that people have never seen before. Advertising has changed many times throughout history, but the basic idea has remained the same. People need to know that something exists, and someone has to tell them. Today, we see advertisements on our phones, on television, on websites, and along highways. We hardly notice them, but long ago, a person might have been the advertisement. A walking sign, moving slowly through the town. The human billboard was simple, but it worked. It brought attention to businesses and events, and for ordinary workers, it provided a way to earn money. As evening settles, the man reaches his home. He opens the door and steps inside. He puts away his coat. Then he sits down and rests. Outside, the town becomes darker. The shops close. The market grows silent. Lanterns glow along the narrow streets. The large signs are no longer visible. Tomorrow they will return, but tonight the town can rest. The human billboard has finished his work. Another unusual profession has quietly disappeared into the pages of history. And perhaps, somewhere beneath the old streets, the memory of those walking signs still remains. For now, the wind moves gently. The lanterns flicker. The rooftops are quiet. And the old town slowly falls asleep.